Hello and welcome to the Elsie B. Smith Show. Our topic today is Science or Spirit, the Art of Growing Young. And my guest is Ralph Maliphant. Ralph trained as a massage therapist at the Maitri Foundation at the age of 68 in 2003 and 2004, and he completed an advanced year of training to learn the skills of dynamic bodywork. He started training in the Rosen method in 2009, and he qualified as an intern in 2012. That means he's licensed to work on the public. At the age of, I'm not going to tell you that, he is getting ready to qualify as a full Rosen method practitioner. Ralph, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Well, if you started training at the age of 68 quite a while ago, you must be close to 65 now, is it?
My birthday is on Monday, October the 2nd, and I'll be 83.
You'll be 83.
Yes.
You don't look 83. Apart from the bit of grey in the beard, you definitely don't look 83. So there must be some sort of secret behind this. And there must be a reason why you haven't retired yet.
Yes. Well, we have to go back half my lifetime ago and some more. I was a scientist in radio propagation research.
Yeah.
I started building shortwave radios at 14, and it was my delight. It just brought the whole world into me, no television or internet in those days. And I loved it. And what really enchanted me was the invisible radio waves traveling all the way around the world through the upper through the ionosphere, the upper atmosphere. And it just enchanted me. I found it quite magical, and I knew at 14 that would be my future career. And I wanted to get into research, although I didn't know that word at that time. It was the nitty-gritty that I wanted to get into, really studying and advancing. So, just to cut that story short, I eventually emigrated with my first wife at 22 to Canada, and went for an interview at the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation because there was only one place I wanted to work in Canada. It was the International Service Transmitters in Sackville, New Brunswick. And I had written to them, but they couldn't find any trace of any letter when I went to see them. So they were starting from scratch, and they interviewed me, and they said, well, there's just two vacancies, one in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, local broadcasting, which didn't interest me, and the other one in the only place in the whole of Canada that I wanted to work.
Wow. Talk about synchronicity then.
Absolutely, and the chances were absolutely zero because there were about 12 people working there, and there was never a vacancy. But I knew there would be. I absolutely knew it would happen, and it did. And so we travelled 1,000 miles down to Sackville, New Brunswick, and started my career there. I later, 18 months later, moved up with my wife to Ottawa and to get into research, and spent 4 more years there, which were wonderful years, taking me up to the Arctic quite a number of times, including north of the North Magnetic Pole, Resolute Bay. As north at that time, it's currently south of the North Magnetic Pole, which is quite fascinating.
Goodness, yeah.
And I was able to advance enormously there, even though I left school at 16 and didn't go to university. I advanced and produced papers in various journals and presentations at NATO conferences, and was treated as a doctor, PhD.
Okay. So you didn't need to necessarily follow a spiritual career to look the way you do and to have the outlook that you do have. Well, you actually started off as a scientist.
Yes, and I guess I would have carried on that way, but life changed all that.
Yeah, as they do.
Yes, as it does. We came back with 3 children, and the last one was only a month old, and I had to go. My wife wanted us to come back for Christmas, and we did that. But I couldn't quite finish the long-term project I was on in time, so I went back for 6 months to complete that. And during that time, she stayed with her parents, and also during that time, she deteriorated enormously. Perhaps it was postnatal depression, but it brought up an awful lot more that I wasn't aware of, and she had a mental breakdown.
Oh,
and my concern for her in psychiatric hospital, where she wasn't progressing with drugs and DCT, and the plight of others in the same position, really took my mind totally away from technology to human beings, and I felt only people were important to me from that time. And I knew that when I had the opportunity, I would eventually be working with people. But that was what shifted me.
So it was a particular life experience that made you aware of who am I, what am I here for, that then made you change direction.
Yes, and I didn't know anything about the unconscious at that stage. Perhaps I was much more working with my left hemisphere. But necessarily I started searching for help for my wife. And ultimately I discovered in a book in the library nearby one chapter about psychotherapy.
Yeah.
And it struck me so forcibly then, because the other approaches were blocking whatever was wrong so that you didn't feel it. That didn't seem an ideal way to me. And when I read about psychotherapy, where one tries to meet with whatever it is, I thought, this is it, this is the right way.
Yeah.
And remarkably, with the help of our GP, I was able to get her transferred 100 miles to London to the care of the author of this book.
So that you then changed into a different career at that time?
I did some work with people at that time to help pay for treatment. As well as working at GCHQ, at that time I worked at GCHQ actually for 14 years. The only person to reach Principal Scientific Officer grade without a degree. And that was simply because I was able to follow my passion. And actually, I was at an advantage with that, because other people trained similarly to each other looked in a certain way. I looked at the places they didn't look in, and it was to a great advantage, and I've been doing that ever since, I think.
You followed your passion.
Absolutely.
That is so important, to actually follow your passion and have a passion all the time.
Yes. Passion is everything, really, the inner life flow. It's all about flow in the end. And I learnt a lot about myself at that time. I was seeking to, in fact, I suggested to the doctors in the clinic that it would be a good idea to take me on for psychotherapy as well as my wife, in case I was relevant to her breakdown. They did take me on, but stopped after about 2 months because it seemed I wasn't. But that started me learning a lot about the inner person, and I haven't stopped.
Of course.
Including quite a lot of psychotherapy, but also a lot of, before I got into more advanced approaches, I was going through hell, and we did go, we did separate after about 14 years of marriage, about 7 years after the breakdown. And that was the worst time for me. I'd never imagined anything like that in the past. And I went through a whole lot of stuff at that time alone in my flat, including allowing myself to go mad in the evenings so that I didn't go mad in the daytime and could carry on working at GCHQ. And nobody knew what I was going through. It was totally hidden, and I think that was a salvation, allowing whatever was to come up. And the only outlet I had I started writing poetry, and I couldn't not write poetry. That was my outlet, and it would just be continuous writing. And when I stopped, that was the poem. And I have a lot of poems of that sort which are very powerful, and I haven't changed the word.
Of course, of course. So life is not always rosy, not even for those who remain young at heart. And the important thing is how you deal with the downside of life. You could, like you say, you could numb it with stuff like alcohol and any other kind of chemical, but that's not the way to deal with it. You need to face it. You need to let it out.
You do, absolutely. And it seems to me that the more that one can face in oneself, just allow it to surface and be presented in whatever way, and then gain help for meeting it, then the more that one can release, the more whole one is, and actually one gets younger.
Indeed. There's a fascinating process behind it, but before I get to the process behind it, you talk about getting help. I have been at low points in my life where the most difficult part for me was to say, I need help, because I'm independent, I'm strong, I cope with stuff, I always find a way. But there were times where I had to say, I need help. How did you find that?
I think my reading helped a lot. To guide me to what was normal. I've got about 1,000 books, mainly, well, either on the scientific side or on the human side. More now on the human side.
Yeah.
And they're so hugely valuable. I just gained so much, and my inquiry scientifically into the human being as well now is just so much a part of it. There was a little book called "Would You Still Like Me If You Really Knew Me?" And little books like that are gems, I think, where one begins to recognise that there's stuff in oneself that one's ashamed of, or just feels guilt, or all sorts of things. And they're usually fairly innocent, because most of these things come from childhood, and we get an impression of ourselves when we're very little, and whatever we're told off about, whatever we're shouted at about, we can't reason that whoever it was is having a bad day or something like that. And we feel it, and we can't deal with it. That's why it goes into one's body, but it stays with us, and we have those feelings from childhood. The beauty, though, is that once one begins to realise that, I think it was that set me forward, because I thought there's no point actually just staying with this struggle. It did help to let it out in poetry and other ways, but I knew I needed more help, and I started seeking for it.
And where did you find the help?
It started actually in the early days of group workshops, encounter groups and things like that. I go way back. And there was one group in London which sounded just what I needed. And I was living in Cheltenham, 100 miles from London, but I went down once a week, drove down 100 miles for an evening session in the group. And it was absolutely what I needed, but it was very difficult. I felt, actually at that time, because I was in touch with myself as I was, I felt like a head on legs. No body. I felt cut off at the neck. And I knew that I had to move this block down.
To the heart.
Yes, and beyond. And when it got to my belly area, then I felt it would be robust and telling me stuff. And each week I would go, and I would see other people things happening to them. There was a circle, and somebody would be worked with in the middle of the circle. It would affect other people in the group, and they would move in and be worked with. And I saw all of this, and I thought it was exactly what I needed, and I wanted to go with it. And I felt tears of recognition coming up behind my eyes.
Yeah, yeah.
And like a good little soldier boy that I'd been trained to be, I stuffed them back down. And I knew that was what I had to not do. And it was like there was a wall of tears, a brick wall of tears. And I had a sense that there was an infinity of doors beyond that were available. But they weren't available at all until I could crash through this wall of tears.
Yeah.
And each week I would go, and each week other things would happen, and I would vow to stop myself from stopping myself, and each week I did stop myself. And then, fortunately, at the end of the 6 weeks, one man there who was very similar to me in his situation in every respect, he asked if we could have an extension in his house for the weekend. And it was agreed, and we went there. And I think because it was his own environment, he was able to crash through this barrier, and that took me with it. And I haven't looked back.
It's fascinating, the process you describe. Now, I wasn't aware of the scientific side of it, but I've done loads of psychic readings for people where what came up was this inner conflict where there's shall we say the good part and the bad part of you, and yes, it's me, no, it's not me, and they all fight against each other, and the more intense the fight gets, the more intense the problem gets, until I always visualize it like two little men running up a spiral, and they're aiming for the top position. And they think that only one of them can get the top position. So the two sides of you are fighting, and this fight is getting more and more intense until they get to the top position, and they merge. Yes. And you have that moment of love, of joy, and the aha moment. And then I discovered that there's something very similar in quantum physics, where you have fermions. Fermions are very selfish, me, myself, and I. And they fight against each other until the tension between them gets so strong that they merge and form a boson, which is a God moment. Yes. It's the aha moment. And this help that you get, it sounds to me like that's what happened there.
Yes.
And can I just say, where every time you get to this aha moment, every cell in your body feels that. Yes. And you vibrate at a higher level, and that makes you younger.
Yes, and I can give a strange example of that. I haven't heard of anybody else experiencing body work in this way, but we'll perhaps come to Rosen later. But when I was on a couch in the early days of going to intensives, and a wonderful man from Sweden was working on me, and the other people were witnessing this all around. And I was going through some struggle which I was in touch with, but not with my head, but with my body, or more correctly, with the energies, and it translated for me into a different image. And I said to the people there, believing it, although speaking to them, that I was in the sea, in the turbulent sea, on the tiny raft. I was holding on. It wasn't a metaphor. I was actually experiencing that. And I was holding on for dear life. And I knew, ultimately, that it was going to get me. I couldn't fight it. It wasn't going to stop me in so huge waves. And I had the feeling, I can't win. I can't.
Yes.
I'm just going to...
It's just not worth
let
it.
it take me.
Yeah.
And I let go.
Yeah.
Expecting to be gone.
Yeah.
And then I said to the people, oh, I'm on a magic carpet. I'm sitting up on the magic carpet, gliding over the meadows. Yeah. And it surprised me more than anybody else, I think.
It's that moment when you step off the cliff expecting to fall, and then you fly.
Yes, exactly.
Wow.
Exactly that.
Just amazing.
Yes.
And from my experience, and it sounds like from yours as well, the more you do this stuff, the more you confront your own inner demons, the younger you grow.
Yes, and now I hardly see it as demons. I see it as parts of me
Yes.
that are held, locked, and they're under
Yeah.
under the rocks. And
Yeah.
I just every time I go into any therapeutic context, this is what I want: just freeing of more of those coming up in whatever way. And some of it can be quite turbulent
Indeed.
and difficult to share. I know when I was at the very beginning of training, I would speak eloquently as I could to describe what was going on in me. It was almost poetic.
Yeah.
And I was trying so hard. And the leader, lovely lady from America, she said, "Ralph, what you're saying is very beautiful, but stop.
Just
Stop.
let it be.
Don't say anything.
Yes.
Just feel where in your body do you feel the hurt." And I thought I was going to faint. I was spinning and I could hardly stand. And then eventually I said, "Here." And everybody could see I was in touch. They were in touch with what was happening.
Yeah. So all of this happened at around an age where you were supposed to retire.
Yes. Again, life interfered and informed me. I've been through three other careers before this one, but the middle one was working with computer software and big systems of my own development, and there were four of us working together on different projects, and we recognized that we needed to do something to get more fit. So we agreed to go out and play mixed doubles tennis in the evenings. I used to play in my youth and I was quite good, so I wanted to be quite good again. In this evening when we were playing, I lunged for a ball and I only had old trainers on, and they tore, and it tore my Achilles tendon. And I had to have my leg in plaster for quite a few weeks, and then first of all up to the knee, and then subsequently the whole length for some reason. And they didn't tell me something which they should have done, really. I was beginning to get back pain, and this was a warning sign. But one morning I woke up after a reasonable night's sleep, and I was walking into the bathroom, and I started, strange things were happening, and fortunately my wife heard and she came up, but I found myself collapsed on the bathroom floor.
Oh, goodness.
And saying, "What am I doing down here?" And she asked me if she should get the doctor or the ambulance, and I remember thinking, ambulance. And when the medics came and they looked at me, naked heap on the bathroom floor, they looked at me and they looked at my wife and they shook their heads and they said, "No chance." They in their wisdom, in their knowledge of such happenings, they knew, in quotes, that they couldn't get me 15 miles to the nearest hospital. However, obviously they did. And when my wife phoned up fearing the worst, and the doctor came on the phone and he said, "Well, he's alive, but I don't know why." But actually I did know why. I'd been going in and out of consciousness in the ambulance, but in my conscious states I was agonizing about the mortgage. I just transferred the mortgage to a new company, and they said it would take a couple of weeks or so to get the insurance sorted out. And I thought, I can't go, I can't. It would be bad enough for my wife and 7-year-old daughter if I go now. But financially, with £100,000 mortgage, they're really going to be up the creek. And
Oh, my goodness.
I think the mortgage saved my life. but also, two things happened there. In the ambulance, I was lying on my back, but involuntarily I was coming up at about 30 degrees with my body just moving me and my voice saying, ah, ah. I couldn't not do it, and I didn't know why I was doing, but it was happening. And also, at some stage, I probably had paddles, I don't know, but because I did have a near-death experience, and it was wonderful. It was incandescent white and like a glade of trees, and it wasn't trees, but it felt like that, and it was just absolutely wonderful. And I absolutely know that if I'd had nobody on earth that mattered to me or me to them, I would have chosen to go. I would have gone, but this wasn't my time. I needed to come back, and I did. And they got me into hospital, and it was found out that I had blood clots coming up from the torn Achilles tendon held by the plaster cast into my chest, and pulmonary embolism it's called, and I was given heparin and warfarin, which is rat poison, and it thins the blood to stop it clotting. And I was going to be all right then. I knew I was going to be all right eventually.
Yeah.
Although I did notice that when I first went into the emergency room with the saline drip, I could feel some body coming back into me. Up to then I was just like a rag doll. And, I knew that when there was a little bit more body strength that there was hope. And I remember the main doctor, they were all milling around, and he apologised to me for all the attention that they were giving, and I said, please carry on.
Go on. Absolutely, give as much attention as you want.
So I eventually came out of hospital, and my wife comes from Cornwall, so we went for a holiday in Cornwall, and we were just getting out of the car park at the beginning of this time, and my wife caught sight of a gypsy at the far side, and she said that gypsy is making a beeline for us. And she was, and I welcomed it actually. And the first words that the gypsy said just after I'd come out of hospital, well, 6 months after, it was, you nearly died recently.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, yes, she is seeing for real something. So I listened, and her next words were, and you're going to live till 96.
Okay.
And I thought, yes, now that makes sense.
Indeed.
That felt so right, because, I felt you don't go to the edge of death and come back and just carry on in the same way. You're a changed person.
Indeed.
And I was, and I felt I needed to be with this new self in whatever way I was guided to. And it was on the strength of that I started training at 69 after I retired from my normal careers, training in bodywork, which seemed my way into the human being. I'd always been a physical sort of person, good at high jumping in particular in my past over my height. And it was a way in, and it was a rejuvenating way, because of course I was the oldest person there, and I was being energized really by all the young people and their different way of life, because life had changed during that time, and young people nowadays are so different to how I was at the same age. They're much more in touch with the reality of life, the real things, whereas I was conditioned to follow certain paths. And with my first wife, when I had a serious girlfriend, inevitably I would get married to my girlfriend at 22, and so at 21, and then we had married at 22. I think the young people are just so significant now. But I
So
think
much
also,
more in touch.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. But I think the mixture of young and old is ever so important. And I think it's my role now. And I do find that I have a special role in my work now because I'm a different person to who I might have been at 30 or 40. And if I look back, actually, to my time when I was a career scientist, even though I was happy and progressing well, it was because I didn't know what I now know, and I would hate to be that person now. It's like then I was in the top of the iceberg, and now I'm inhabiting all that area below, and it's so different. And I just want everybody to know that possibility, and of course, especially people who have had traumatic experience. So anyway, in my massage training, one of the options was to show how one progressed by writing a thesis, a research report.
Yeah.
And I did that, a 50-page report, and I really looked into, unusually for that training, the somatic counterpart of emotional disturbance, how it affects the body, and I learnt all the ways that were then available to work with that, and I wanted to experience some of the possibilities, even through massage, that could bring out the blocked person, the blocked parts, held parts of ourselves.
Yeah.
It never quite worked for me enough, and then my wife and I went through a sticky patch for a little time, and it was partly because of my newfound energies and my interactions with other people, which didn't look as innocent as they actually were. But we had some money left from an old mortgage account, and we spent all of that over 2 years going to a couple, a man and a woman, not a couple, who were working psychotherapeutically with us. And it really did work. It was a very important time finding ourselves. And but one time, just very near the end of this 2 years, we were coming down the stairs from where we were meeting, and there was one pamphlet on the windowsill, just one, no other pamphlets anywhere. And it was advertising a lady who was doing work with listening hands.
Yeah.
And I thought, that sounds very much like what I'm searching for.
Yeah, yeah. Synchronicity again.
Synchronicity. And I started going to bodywork sessions with this lady. And she turned out to be training in Rosen method bodywork. It was early days, and she was working in a somewhat different way at that time, but informed by what she was learning. And I immediately discovered that things were happening in me that didn't happen in any other bodywork I'd experienced.
Yeah.
And I became very enamored by this, and I kept going, obviously, and I got more and more fascinated and learning more from her about what she was training in. And I thought, gosh, I would love to train in this, but it seemed very expensive for me then, and very long, the training. And I thought, oh, if only I were younger, I would go for this. And then as things progressed in the sessions, I thought, no, I've got to go for this.
Yeah, follow your passion again.
Absolutely. And it was the gypsies message to me that I had enough time.
Yeah.
It was 96 was a long way ahead.
And you just had that deep sense of knowing this is important. I have to listen to this. I have to deal with this, and I have to follow this route.
Yes.
Yeah.
I couldn't not do it, and it became possible. And that was the remarkable thing. It didn't seem possible, but somehow it became possible, and everything has flourished. And in the training, one can go to the week-long intensives, whether one's training or not, and that's fascinating. It's an empirical approach to the training, and so. Because the most important thing is one's own inner growth in it. One can't do this work unless one is really, really in touch. And one can't be really, really in touch if one's held within oneself in all sorts of struggles.
Indeed, yeah. So that's your secret for growing young. Follow your passion.
Yes.
Look at the synchronicities, because you know when they touch your life. Listen to that inner voice, to that deep sense of knowing, and confront your stuff.
Yes, and one doesn't need to be afraid. I think that was. I'm not quite sure what did it for me, but somehow I was guided to not be afraid. So I'm not afraid of other people's turbulence, and I'm not afraid of my own. And I think. Fear is what holds one back.
Oh, yes.
And I think it's also what causes the conflicts, because one's trained by life history to be in certain ways. And one has to break free of that in certain ways. And the old training doesn't help.
It doesn't. And you know what I've recently discovered about retirement? In the 19th century, retirement wasn't a concept that existed. It only originated in the 20th century, and so many millions of people became slaves of the concept of retirement. When I'm 60 or 65, that's when I've got to stop living. Good Lord, no! That's when you change gears. That's when you listen, you follow your passion. That's when you realize there is just so much more to do, and there's so little time left. And I'm not talking about a year or two. We all now live way past 100 years. How are we going to make the best of it?
Yes, absolutely. And in the old days, a person might follow their training, their path, their education, become boss of some big organization, very important person. And then comes retirement.
And the plug is pulled. The plug is pulled, and they literally go downhill. I've seen that with people close to me. It is heartbreaking to see them lose their purpose in life because the government says so. No. So this has been really, really enlightening, Ralph. There's such a strong message behind what you have told us. Yes, it's all been very individual experiences, but I think what you've said could apply to just about each one of us. Don't listen to what other people say. Follow your heart. Follow your passion. I think you said to me quite a while ago that. Oh, yes, you said you want to be at your most complete on your deathbed. I remember that from a previous conversation.
That's right. And as a boy, I was interested in, as a scout, I was fascinated by American Indians. And I delighted in their bare feet walking on rough ground and being so attuned to it. And I also learned that I had the image of an old Indian on his deathbed being truly there, almost going alive into his death, with all those people around, and it seems so eminently possible now. And also, I heard what Pablo Picasso said. He said, "It takes a long time to grow young."
Indeed, indeed.
And it's exactly so, and I'm growing younger all the time. I feel a lot younger than when I was 40.
Indeed, indeed. So when you do transition, which will probably be way after the age of 96, you will transition into a higher level. You don't need to come back and repeat what you should have learned past retirement, because you're done. You're learning it at the moment.
That may be so. I'll find out.
We'll talk again at some point,
Yes,
maybe 60
that
years
would
from
be
now.
very nice. Yes, yes.
Well, Ralph, thank you very much. This has been
That's
really
all right.
fascinating. If people want to get hold of you, if they want to have more information about the Rosen method, which you are qualifying in now,
Yes.
or just guidance, advice from you, where can they get hold of you?
They can get hold of me at the best way is my email address, which is simply ralph.maliphant@gmail.com.
Okay. Thank you for that. And I really appreciate the time and effort that you put into this.
Thank you very much, Elsie.
And
It's delightful.
I'll see you next week again, same place, same time, 4 o'clock on Sunday afternoon with another fascinating topic. Thank you and goodbye.